In the forgotten archives of a Charleston courthouse, buried beneath decades of water damage and neglect, lies a birth certificate that should not exist. Dated March 1847, the document records the delivery of a child to a woman named Celia. Yet the physician's notes contain measurements and observations contradicting every known principle of human gestation. These numbers do not align with any medical understanding of pregnancy, then or now. By 1849, the Charleston Medical Society had quietly sealed the related documents. Within 18 months, the 3 physicians involved in the case left the state, never to practice medicine again. For over a century and a half, descendants of those who witnessed the events have refused to discuss the details, passing down only warnings to leave Celia's story alone. Tonight, we examine the documented facts of a case that defies rational explanation. Not through supernatural means, but through circumstances so disturbing that those who knew the truth chose silence over revelation. Before we continue with the story of Celia and the impossible pregnancy that terrified Charleston's medical establishment, I need you to do something. Subscribe to this channel right now, because stories like this, ones that history tried to bury, are not told anywhere else. And comment below, what state or city are you listening from? I want to know how far these forgotten American mysteries reach. What made Celia's case so profoundly unsettling was not what people claimed to see, but what the medical professionals documented in writing. Measurements, dates, and physical impossibilities that no amount of ignorance or superstition could explain away. Charleston in the 1840s was a city of contradictions, where immense wealth existed alongside brutal subjugation, where refined society depended entirely on the labor of those it refused to acknowledge as fully human. The port city hummed with commerce. Cotton, rice, and indigo flowed through its docks, making fortunes for the planter class, while enslaved people performed every task that kept the machinery of prosperity turning. During this era, the city's medical community had gained particular prominence, with several physicians publishing papers on tropical diseases, childbirth complications, and what they termed the peculiar physiological differences of enslaved populations. Research was conducted without consent, often under the most horrific circumstances. Situated 12 miles northwest of Charleston proper, the Hartwell Plantation was a mid-sized operation of approximately 300 acres, worked by 42 enslaved people. Edmund Hartwell had inherited the property from his father in 1839 and, unlike many of his contemporaries, took an active interest in its daily management. His wife Margaret died in childbirth in 1842, leaving him childless and increasingly bitter. The overseer, a transplanted Virginian named Thomas Gaines, ran the actual operations with notorious efficiency and cruelty that Edmund either ignored or tacitly approved. Born on the Hartwell plantation in 1826, Celia was approximately 20 years old when the events of this account began. Records describe her as strong-built, capable in the fields and kitchen, and quiet in disposition. After Margaret Hartwell's death, she worked primarily in the main house, handling cooking and cleaning duties. Several quarterly reports from Gaines noted her satisfactory behavior and diligent work habits, the kind of bland observations that filled countless plantation ledgers, revealing nothing of the person beneath. The other enslaved people on the Hartwell property included Samuel, a blacksmith of considerable skill purchased from a Savannah estate sale in 1844, and old Ruth, a woman in her 60s who served as an unofficial midwife and healer for the enslaved community. Ruth had delivered more than 100 babies over her lifetime, possessing the kind of practical medical knowledge that came from decades of experience and necessity. The enslaved quarters consisted of 12 rough cabins arranged in 2 rows behind the main house, each housing multiple families in cramped, inadequate conditions. Charleston's medical establishment in this period included several prominent physicians who would become relevant to Celia's story. Dr. William Saunders had practiced in the city for 15 years, primarily serving wealthy white families, but was occasionally called to attend to enslaved people when their value as property warranted medical intervention. Dr. James Pritchard, younger and more ambitious, had recently arrived from Philadelphia with newfangled ideas about obstetrics and had published 2 papers on maternal health. Dr. Henry Strickland, the eldest of the 3, had practiced medicine for nearly 40 years and was known for his meticulous record-keeping and scientific approach. The winter of 1846 proceeded normally on the Hartwell plantation. The cotton had been picked and processed, the fields prepared for the next planting season, the endless cycle of labor continuing without pause. Celia performed her duties in the main house, largely invisible to Edmund Hartwell except when he required something. The other enslaved people noted nothing unusual about her behavior or appearance during these months. Old Ruth would later testify that Celia had shown no signs of illness or physical change throughout the entire winter. It wasn't until March of 1847 that circumstances would transform Celia from an anonymous enslaved woman into the subject of medical documentation so disturbing it would haunt Charleston's physicians for years to come. On the morning of March 18, 1847, Celia collapsed while carrying firewood into the main house. Annoyed by the disruption to his breakfast routine, Edmund Hartwell sent for old Ruth to deal with the situation. Ruth arrived to find Celia conscious but in obvious distress, her abdomen rigid and distended, her breathing shallow. What Ruth discovered during her examination caused her to do something she had never done before. She refused to treat the patient and insisted that Edmund send for a white physician immediately. "I ain't touching this," Ruth reportedly told the other enslaved women who had gathered. "This ain't natural. This ain't right. Mr. Hartwell need to get a real doctor." Irritated by what he perceived as Ruth's superstition but concerned about the potential loss of property, Edmund sent a rider to Charleston to fetch Dr. Saunders. The physician arrived late that afternoon, expecting to find a simple case of digestive distress or perhaps a miscarriage. What he encountered instead would challenge everything he thought he understood about human biology. Dr. Saunders's initial examination notes, preserved in the Charleston Medical Society archives, make for disturbing reading. He documented that Celia's abdomen was grossly distended, firm to palpation, with movement clearly visible beneath the abdominal wall. This suggested advanced pregnancy, except that Celia, according to every witness, including Edmund Hartwell himself, had shown absolutely no signs of pregnancy until that very morning. No morning sickness, no enlargement of the breasts, no changes in appetite or behavior, no gradual expansion of the belly that would accompany normal gestation. The patient presented no observable signs of gravidity at any point prior to this date, Dr. Saunders wrote. Yet examination reveals clear evidence of advanced pregnancy, estimated at 7 to 8 months by abdominal measurements. This is medically impossible. A pregnancy cannot progress to such an advanced stage without visible signs. Either the patient has been concealing her condition through methods unknown to medical science, or we are witnessing a phenomenon entirely outside my experience. Dr. Saunders performed additional examinations, bringing in Dr. Pritchard for a second opinion. Both physicians documented the same impossibility. Celia appeared to be in the late stages of pregnancy, yet she had shown no symptoms whatsoever until that morning. The fetal heartbeat was strong and clearly audible through a stethoscope. The movement within her abdomen was vigorous and frequent. By every medical standard, she was carrying a healthy, nearly full-term child, one that had somehow developed without any of the normal indicators. Practical in matters of property, Edmund Hartwell asked the obvious question, when did this happen? Who is responsible? The question revealed an even deeper mystery. When questioned, Celia insisted she had been with no man. Old Ruth confirmed this, stating she would have known if any of the enslaved men had been involved with Celia. Such things rarely remain secret in the close quarters of plantation life. Thomas Gaines, the overseer, denied any involvement and suggested Celia was lying. Edmund Hartwell himself had taken no interest in Celia in that manner, and his household staff confirmed his general avoidance of the enslaved women since his wife's death. "She says she ain't been with nobody," old Ruth told Dr. Saunders. "And I believe her. Something else going on here, Doctor." Dr. Pritchard attempted to question Celia about when she might have conceived, walking her through the timeline. By his calculations, if she was indeed 7 to 8 months pregnant, conception would have occurred in late July or early August of 1846. Celia maintained she had been with no one during that time, or any time since. The plantation records showed no visitors during that period, no traveling salesmen or itinerant workers who might have had access to the quarters. Over the next 3 days, Celia's condition progressed rapidly. Her belly continued to expand at a rate that alarmed both physicians. Dr. Saunders's notes from March 21 record, patient's abdomen has increased in circumference by 4 inches since initial examination 3 days prior. This rate of growth is unprecedented. The fetus remains active, heartbeat strong. Patient experiencing significant discomfort but no labor contractions. Unable to explain observed phenomena through any known medical framework. Dr. Strickland joined the other physicians on March 22, and his presence lent additional credibility to the documentation. A man of science who trusted only what he could measure and observe, Strickland performed his own independent examination. His conclusions matched those of his colleagues. Celia was unquestionably pregnant with a healthy fetus. Yet the timeline and progression defied rational explanation. I have attended more than 1,000 births in my career, Dr. Strickland wrote in his personal journal. I have never witnessed anything approaching this case. Either this woman has deceived us all through methods I cannot fathom, or we are observing a biological impossibility. I am inclined toward the latter, though I cannot explain what mechanism might account for such rapid development. The physicians discussed removing Celia to Charleston for more intensive observation, but Edmund Hartwell refused, stating he would not have his property paraded through the city streets. The doctors agreed to remain at the plantation, documenting the case with scientific rigor while waiting for labor to begin naturally. On the evening of March 23, Celia went into labor. What followed would cement this case in Charleston's medical history as something that should never have happened, and that no one who witnessed it could ever fully explain. The labor lasted 14 hours, beginning just after sunset and continuing through the night into the following morning. Dr. Saunders, Dr. Pritchard, and Dr. Strickland all attended, with old Ruth present to provide practical assistance. The physicians documented every stage of the process with unusual thoroughness, perhaps sensing they were witnessing something that would require extensive evidence to be believed. Dr. Pritchard's delivery notes describe a birth that proceeded normally in every respect save one, the size of the infant. The child, a girl, weighed 11 pounds and measured 23 inches in length, substantially larger than average, but not impossibly so. She appeared healthy and fully developed, crying vigorously upon delivery, showing no signs of distress or abnormality. But the timing remained inexplicable. The physicians had examined Celia 5 days earlier and estimated her pregnancy at 7 to 8 months. Yet the infant delivered showed every sign of being full-term, with the physical development typical of a 40-week gestation. The rapid progression from near-term to delivery suggested a developmental acceleration that violated every principle of embryology. The infant displays characteristics consistent with full gestational development, Dr. Strickland recorded. Fully formed lungs, vigorous cry, strong muscle tone, appropriate fat deposits beneath skin. Yet our examination of the mother 5 days prior indicated a pregnancy of approximately 32 weeks. Either our initial assessment was dramatically incorrect, which I cannot accept given 3 independent examinations, or this child developed at a rate incompatible with human biology. Presented with a healthy enslaved infant girl who would eventually represent additional property value, Edmund Hartwell showed no particular interest in the medical mystery. He named the child Dinah, as was his right, and instructed that Celia return to work duties as soon as she recovered. For him, the situation had resolved satisfactorily. He had suffered no property loss and had gained a future worker. But the physicians could not let the matter rest. 3 days after the delivery, Dr. Saunders, Dr. Pritchard, and Dr. Strickland convened at Dr. Strickland's Charleston office to review their documentation. They had measurements, dates, multiple independent examinations, all pointing to the same impossible conclusion: Celia had progressed from showing no signs of pregnancy to delivering a full-term infant in less than a week. We must consider the possibility that we were somehow deceived, Dr. Pritchard suggested during their meeting. Perhaps the woman bound her abdomen tightly throughout the pregnancy, concealing her condition until she could no longer do so. Such practices are not unknown. Dr. Strickland shook his head. I examined her clothing. There was no binding, no compression. And no binding could conceal a pregnancy so completely that she showed absolutely no physical changes for 8 months. The breasts alone would have enlarged significantly. Her gait would have altered. She would have gained weight beyond the abdominal region. Every enslaved person on that plantation swears she showed no signs whatsoever until the morning of March 18th. Then what do you propose? Dr. Saunders asked. That the child materialized inside her womb in a matter of days? That human gestation can somehow accelerate to completion in less than a week? Such a claim would destroy our professional credibility. The three men sat in silence, confronting documentation that seemed irrefutable yet described events that could not possibly have occurred. They had witnessed something that challenged the foundations of medical science, yet they could not publish their findings without inviting ridicule and professional destruction. Dr. Strickland made a proposal: we submit a sealed report to the Charleston Medical Society documenting our observations without drawing conclusions. We present the facts as we recorded them, the dates, the measurements, the multiple examinations. We acknowledge the impossibility of what we observed while maintaining that our documentation is accurate. Future medical men with greater knowledge than we possess may be able to explain what we cannot. The other physicians agreed to this compromise. On April 3, 1847, they submitted their joint report to the Charleston Medical Society, accompanied by all their examination notes, measurements, and observations. The Society's response came 2 weeks later. The report would be accepted and sealed, but not published or distributed. The case of Celia's impossible pregnancy would be preserved for posterity, but hidden from public scrutiny. The board finds the documentation compelling, but the implications too extraordinary for public dissemination, the Society's letter stated. Such a case, if widely known, would invite sensationalism and undermine public confidence in medical science. The report will be preserved in our archives for potential future study. The physicians accepted this decision, though not without reservation. In a letter to a colleague in Philadelphia, Dr. Pritchard wrote, "We have witnessed something that defies explanation. Yet we are bound to silence by professional necessity. I cannot say whether we observed a miracle, a deception beyond human capability, or a natural phenomenon so rare and unusual that science has yet to account for it. I know only that I saw what I saw, and it should not have been possible." Within the enslaved community at the Hartwell plantation, Celia's mysterious pregnancy became a subject of whispered speculation. Some viewed it as a blessing, others as something darker. Old Ruth, who had refused to attend Celia during her initial collapse, maintained her distance even after the successful delivery. "That child ain't right," Ruth told the other enslaved women. "Don't matter that she look healthy. Something wrong with how she came to be." Celia herself recovered physically from the delivery within a few weeks, but those who knew her noticed changes in her demeanor. Where she had previously been quiet and unremarkable, she now seemed withdrawn and fearful. She refused to discuss the circumstances of her pregnancy with anyone, simply insisting she had been with no man and knew nothing more than that. True to his word, Edmund Hartwell put Celia back to work in the main house. The infant Dinah was left in the care of other enslaved women during the day, as was standard practice. For several months, the situation appeared to stabilize into a new normal, a mystery that had been witnessed, documented, and then deliberately buried. But Celia's story was far from over. The impossible circumstances of Dinah's conception and rapid development would prove to be merely the first chapter of a mystery that would deepen and darken as the child grew. Dinah's early development proceeded normally by all observable standards. She nursed vigorously, gained weight appropriately, and reached typical infant milestones without incident. Edmund Hartwell, satisfied that his property had increased in value without complication, paid little attention to either mother or child beyond ensuring they performed their assigned tasks. But old Ruth, whose decades of experience had taught her to recognize signs others might miss, began documenting troubling observations about the child. Ruth couldn't read or write, but she had an exceptional memory, and she shared her concerns with Samuel, the blacksmith, who could write and secretly kept a journal hidden in his workshop. Samuel's journal entries from late 1847 and early 1848, discovered decades later among the papers of his descendants, provide disturbing details that the white physicians never knew. According to these entries, Dinah demonstrated physical and cognitive development significantly ahead of normal patterns. At 6 months, she could sit unsupported and was attempting to pull herself to standing, milestones typically reached several months later. At 8 months, she spoke her first words, not the babbling approximations of infant speech, but clear, recognizable words. "Ruth say the child ain't natural," Samuel wrote in October 1847. "Say she growing too fast, learning too quick. Say it remind her of something, but she won't say what. Other women scared of the baby won't hardly look at her. Celia don't say nothing, just keep her head down and do her work. The accelerated development, while unusual, might have been dismissed as exceptional but not impossible. Some children simply develop faster than others. But other observations recorded in Samuel's journal suggested something more profoundly wrong. The child don't cry like other babies, Samuel wrote in December 1847. Ruth say she never heard a baby cry like that. Say it sound wrong. Like something trying to sound like a baby but not quite right. Women say they hear the child making sounds at night. Sounds no baby should make. In February 1848, when Dinah was approximately 11 months old, an incident occurred that crystallized the enslaved community's fear into something approaching terror. One of the younger enslaved women, a 15-year-old named Grace, was tasked with watching Dinah while Celia worked in the main house. Grace later reported to old Ruth that she had seen Dinah, who should barely have been walking, moving across the cabin floor with unnatural coordination, and that when the child had looked directly at her, Grace had felt such profound wrongness that she had screamed and run from the cabin. That child looked at me, and I seen something in her eyes, Grace told Ruth, according to Samuel's journal. Something that know things. Something that understand things no baby should understand. I ain't going near that child again. Thomas Gaines, the overseer, noticed the enslaved workers' reluctance to interact with Dinah and attributed it to ignorance and superstition. He reported to Edmund Hartwell that the Negroes have taken some foolish notion about Celia's child, but that it wasn't interfering with work productivity. Edmund, concerned only with maintaining order and output, instructed Gaines to beat the superstition out of them if necessary, but otherwise ignore the matter. Celia herself had become increasingly isolated within the enslaved community. The other women, who had previously included her in their conversations and shared tasks, now avoided her when possible. Celia seemed to understand their fear and made no effort to combat it. She cared for Dinah with mechanical efficiency, fulfilling the basic requirements of motherhood without the warmth and engagement typically seen between mother and child. Celia treat that baby like she's scared of it too, Samuel recorded in March 1848. Hold it when she have to, feed it when she have to, but soon as she can put it down, she do. Never sing to it like mothers do. Never play with it. Just do what she must and nothing more. The situation might have continued indefinitely in this state of uneasy stability, with the enslaved community frightened but silent, and the white residents of the plantation blissfully unaware of any problem. But in April 1848, circumstances would force the mystery back into the open in a way that could not be ignored. Dr. Pritchard, who had been one of the attending physicians at Dinah's birth, happened to be visiting a neighboring plantation on medical business when he encountered Celia and the child outside the Hartwell property. Curious about how the infant from the impossible pregnancy had developed, he approached to conduct an informal examination. What he observed alarmed him profoundly. Dinah, a just over 1 year old, displayed physical and cognitive development equivalent to a child of at least 2 years. She walked with confident balance, spoke in short but complete sentences, and demonstrated problem-solving abilities far beyond her chronological age. Moreover, her physical proportion seemed subtly wrong in ways Dr. Pritchard couldn't quite articulate: the length of her limbs relative to her torso, the size of her head, the spacing of her features. The child is developing at an extraordinary rate, Dr. Pritchard wrote in his personal journal that evening. If I had not attended her birth myself, if I did not have documentation of her date of delivery, I would estimate her age at 2 years minimum. This cannot be natural variation. This represents a continuation of the same accelerated development we observed in utero. What are we witnessing? What process drives this impossible growth? Dr. Pritchard contacted Dr. Saunders and Dr. Strickland, proposing they request permission from Edmund Hartwell to conduct a comprehensive medical examination of the child. The other physicians, their curiosity rekindled, agreed. They approached Hartwell with their request, framing it as an opportunity to document a medically significant case that might enhance Charleston's reputation for scientific inquiry. Edmund, flattered by the attention and curious about whether Dinah's unusual development might increase her eventual value as property, granted permission for the examination. On April 28, 1848, the three physicians returned to the Hartwell plantation to study the child who should not have existed. Just when we thought we'd seen it all, the horror in Celia's story intensifies. If this account is giving you chills, share this video with a friend who loves dark mysteries. Hit that like button to support our content, and don't forget to subscribe to never miss stories like this. Let's discover together what happens next. The examination took place in the main house parlor, with Edmund Hartwell observing and Celia standing silently in the corner, her face carefully empty of expression. The physicians had brought measuring instruments, developmental assessment tools, and detailed charts for recording their observations. Dinah, at 13 months old, stood 32 inches tall and weighed 28 pounds, measurements consistent with a healthy child of 24 to 30 months. Her motor skills, language development, and cognitive abilities all tracked to an age range of 2 to 2.5 years. The acceleration of her development had not slowed since birth, but had remained constant, as if her internal clock ran at roughly twice the normal rate. Most remarkable, Dr. Strickland murmured, noting her vocabulary and sentence structure. The child speaks with clarity I would not expect until at least 24 months. Yet she is barely past her first birthday. But the physicians' wonder began to shift toward unease as they continued their examination. Dr. Pritchard noted that Dinah's reflexes were unusually sharp. Her responses to stimuli almost preternaturally quick. Her eyes tracked movement with an intensity and focus more typical of much older children. And there was something in her gaze, a quality of attention and awareness that seemed unsettling in an infant. She watches us, Dr. Saunders observed quietly. With purpose, as if assessing us. The most disturbing observations came during the physical examination. When Dr. Strickland attempted to examine Dinah's throat and mouth, the child pulled away with surprising strength. When he persisted, she looked directly at him and said with perfect clarity, "No, that hurts." The three physicians exchanged glances. The statement itself was unremarkable. Many toddlers express reluctance during medical examinations. But the clarity, the intonation, the deliberate communication of complex concepts suggested a level of development far beyond even the accelerated timeline they had been documenting. "How old are you?" Dr. Pritchard asked the child, more as an experiment than expecting a meaningful response. Dinah looked at him for a long moment, then said, "I don't know." "How old are you?" The question, with its implied understanding of age as a concept and its deliberate reversal of the inquiry, should have been beyond a child of 13 months. Edmund Hartwell laughed, delighted by what he perceived as precocious wit. The physicians did not laugh. They completed their examination in silence, recording measurements and observations with increasing discomfort. The child was healthy by every standard medical metric: strong heartbeat, clear lungs, good muscle tone, appropriate weight for her height. But the totality of what they were observing suggested something profoundly wrong despite the apparent health. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Strickland made an unusual request. "Mr. Hartwell, I would like to examine the mother as well, if you permit. I want to ensure she is fully recovered from the delivery and check for any lingering complications." Edmund waved his hand dismissively. "Do as you wish. I have business to attend to." He left the room, taking Dinah with him. Alone with Celia and the other physicians, Dr. Strickland asked the question that had been troubling all three of them: "What happened to you?" "The truth, please. We are physicians. Whatever you tell us, we need to know the medical facts." Celia stood silent for a long moment, her hands clenched at her sides. When she finally spoke, her voice was so quiet they had to lean forward to hear. "I told you the truth before. I've been with no man. I don't know how that child come to be inside me. One day I was normal. Next day I could feel something there, growing fast. Real fast. It hurt like something eating me from the inside, getting bigger and bigger. I wanted to die before that thing was born." "You referred to your daughter as that thing," Dr. Pritchard noted gently. "Why?" "Because she ain't right," Celia said. And for the first time, genuine emotion cracked through her careful facade. "I birthed her, but she ain't mine. She came from somewhere else. She used my body to get born, but she ain't my child." I know a mother supposed to love her baby, but when I look at her, all I feel is wrong. Like something wearing a baby's skin. The three physicians stood frozen, unsure how to respond to this confession. Dr. Saunders attempted rationality. Women sometimes experience difficulty bonding with their infants, especially under circumstances of trauma. I ain't crazy, Celia interrupted, her voice sharp. I know what you're thinking. Poor slave woman don't know no better. Got strange ideas. But you seen her. You examined her. You know something ain't right. You got your measurements and your numbers, but you can feel it too, can't you? That child ain't natural. The physicians could not deny the unease they had felt during the examination. Dr. Strickland cleared his throat. We have documented certain unusual aspects of the child's development. Her growth rate is unprecedented. But unusual is not the same as what I'm telling you, Celia said. And now there was fear in her voice, raw and undisguised. That child know things. She understand things no baby should understand. And she getting stronger. She keep growing at this rate, keep getting smarter this fast. What's she going to be in another year? In 2 years? Something that can pass for a child, but ain't one. Before any of the physicians could respond, the parlor door opened and Edmund Hartwell returned with Dinah toddling beside him. Are you finished with your examination? He asked. I have work to attend to. The physicians gathered their instruments and departed, thanking Edmund for his cooperation. As they rode back toward Charleston, none of them spoke until they were well clear of the plantation. That woman is terrified of her own child, Dr. Pritchard said finally. And after that examination, I cannot say her fear is entirely irrational. We are men of science, Dr. Strickland replied, though his voice lacked conviction. There must be a rational explanation for the child's accelerated development, some rare condition, perhaps genetic in nature, that we have not yet documented or understood. And if there is not? Dr. Saunders asked. If what we are observing falls outside the bounds of natural phenomena, what then? The question hung in the air unanswered. They submitted a second sealed report to the Charleston Medical Society, documenting Dinah's continued accelerated development and the disturbing aspects of their examination. The Society's response was curt: continue observation if possible. Do not discuss case publicly. Further investigation warranted. But further investigation would prove difficult. When Dr. Pritchard attempted to schedule a follow-up examination 3 months later, Edmund Hartwell refused. The child is healthy and valuable, he wrote in response. I see no need for continued medical intrusion. You have your documentation. Be satisfied with that. The physicians had no legal recourse to force the issue. Dinah and Celia were property, and Edmund had every right to deny access. Frustrated but powerless, they could only wonder about the child's continued development from afar. Samuel's journal entries from this period reveal that conditions at the Hartwell plantation were deteriorating. The enslaved community's fear of Dinah had intensified rather than diminished as she grew. Several workers requested reassignment to field duties specifically to avoid contact with Celia and the child. Thomas Gaines, irritated by what he viewed as irrational superstition, responded with increased brutality, using the whip more frequently to enforce compliance. People scared, Samuel wrote in July 1848, not just of the child, but of what might happen because of the child. Feel like something bad coming. Something we can't see yet, but we know it's there. Like a storm building. Ruth say the child going to bring death to this place. Say she seen it before. Long time ago when she was young. Won't tell what she mean by that. In August 1848, Dinah turned 17 months old. According to Samuel's observations, she now displayed development equivalent to a 3-year-old child. She spoke in complex sentences, understood abstract concepts, and exhibited problem-solving abilities that left the enslaved workers simultaneously amazed and disturbed. She had also begun exhibiting behaviors that suggested an understanding of the plantation's social hierarchy and her place within it, an awareness that seemed impossible for a child of her age. The child knows she property, Samuel recorded. Know what that mean? Watch Mr. Hartwell like she's studying him. Watch Gaines, too. Don't act like a child. Not really. Act like something pretending to be a child, learning how to be human. On September 3, 1848, something happened that would transform the situation from mysterious to actively dangerous. Thomas Gaines, drunk and angry after a dispute with Edmund Hartwell over plantation accounts, encountered Celia in the main house kitchen. What transpired is documented only through Celia's later testimony and the observations of other enslaved workers who heard the commotion. Gaines, in his intoxicated state, made advances toward Celia that she rejected. Enraged by her refusal and emboldened by alcohol, he struck her across the face hard enough to knock her to the floor. Dinah, who had been in the corner of the kitchen, witnessed the assault. What happened next, according to multiple witnesses, should have been impossible for a child of 17 months. Dinah walked deliberately to where Gaines stood over her mother and said in a voice clear and cold, "You should not have done that." Gaines, startled by the child's intervention, laughed. "What are you going to do about it, little pickaninny?" Dinah looked up at him, and several witnesses later reported that something in her eyes changed, a quality they could not adequately describe, but that filled them with primal fear. She did not speak again, did not move, simply stared at the overseer with an intensity that was profoundly wrong in a child. Gaines, unnerved despite his drunkenness, backed away from the child and left the kitchen. But the encounter would have consequences neither he nor anyone else could have anticipated. The next morning, Thomas Gaines was found in his cabin, dead. The circumstances of his death would raise questions that neither medical examination nor investigation could satisfactorily answer, and would finally reveal just how dangerous Celia's impossible child had become. Dr. Saunders was summoned to the Hartwell plantation at dawn on September 4, 1848, to examine the body of Thomas Gaines. Edmund Hartwell, shaken by the sudden death of his overseer, wanted an official medical opinion for the record. What Dr. Saunders found defied easy explanation. Thomas Gaines lay in his bed, eyes open, mouth agape in what appeared to be an expression of terror. There were no visible wounds, no signs of violence, no indication of struggle. The cabin showed no evidence of intrusion or disturbance. By all appearances, the man had simply died in his sleep, except for the expression on his face and certain disturbing physical findings. Dr. Saunders's examination notes describe extreme rigor mortis, far beyond what would be expected given the limited time since death. Subject's muscles contracted to a degree I have not observed in 30 years of practice. Facial musculature fixed in expression suggesting extreme fear or pain. No visible cause of death determined. No wounds, no bruising, no signs of poisoning. Heart appears normal upon external examination. Lungs show no fluid accumulation. Cannot determine cause of death without internal examination. Disturbed but pragmatic, Edmund Hartwell approved an autopsy. Dr. Saunders performed the procedure in the plantation's tool shed, with Samuel assisting as directed. What the physician discovered during the internal examination troubled him deeply. Subject's heart shows no disease, Dr. Saunders documented. However, organ appears to have ceased function suddenly and completely, as if all electrical impulses stopped simultaneously. This is not consistent with any pathology I recognize. No blockages in coronary vessels, no structural abnormalities. The heart simply stopped. Edmund Hartwell accepted Dr. Saunders's verdict of death by natural causes, sudden cessation of heart function, cause unknown. Thomas Gaines was buried in the plantation cemetery, and Edmund began the process of hiring a new overseer. For him, the matter was closed. But the enslaved community knew better. They had heard about the confrontation in the kitchen. They had seen Dinah's unnatural stillness, heard her cold voice. And now the man who had struck Celia was dead, his heart stopped for no apparent reason, his face frozen in terror. That child killed him, old Ruth told the other enslaved workers, no longer bothering to hide her conclusions. Don't know how, don't understand it, but that child killed that man. Soon as he hit Celia, he was dead. Just didn't know it yet. The fear that had been building among the enslaved population crystallized into certainty. They avoided Dinah and Celia completely now, refusing to work in the same areas, finding excuses to stay as far away as possible. Celia herself seemed to retreat even further into herself, moving through her days like a ghost, caring for her daughter with mechanical efficiency while radiating a hopelessness that frightened those who saw it. Samuel's journal entries from this period reveal the depth of the community's fear. Nobody will say it out loud where white folks can hear, but we all know that child ain't natural. That child can kill. Ruth say things like this don't live long. That nature finds a way to correct what shouldn't be. But what if she wrong? What if that thing keep growing, keep getting stronger? What it going to be when it looked like a woman but got the power to kill with just a look? Edmund Hartwell remained oblivious to the enslaved workers' fears, attributing their avoidance of Celia and Dinah to the same superstition he had always dismissed. He hired a new overseer, a North Carolinian named William Fletcher, and instructed him to maintain discipline and productivity. Fletcher, practical and brutal in equal measure, used the whip freely to ensure compliance. 2 months after Gaines's death, in early November 1848, Dr. Pritchard happened to encounter Edmund Hartwell at a Charleston social gathering. Inquiring politely about the child from the medical case, Dr. Pritchard was surprised to hear that Dinah was thriving and growing rapidly. Concerned about the child's continued accelerated development and curious about any potential complications, he requested permission to conduct another examination. Edmund, still grieving the loss of Margaret and childless, had developed an almost proprietary pride in Dinah's unusual nature. "Remarkable child," he told Dr. Pritchard. "Sharp as any white child I've seen. Nearly 2 years old, but speaks like a 4-year-old. Fetch her good price in a few years as a lady's maid or house servant. Yes, you may examine her. Come by next week." Dr. Pritchard, Dr. Saunders, and Dr. Strickland arrived at the Hartwell plantation on November 12, 1848. They found Dinah, now 20 months old, displaying development equivalent to a child of 3½ to 4 years. She stood 40 inches tall, weighed 38 pounds, and spoke with grammatical precision and vocabulary that would be advanced even for her apparent developmental age. But what disturbed the physicians most was not her physical growth or linguistic ability. It was the quality of her awareness, the way she observed them with an analytical detachment more typical of an adult than a child, the way she answered their questions with perfect comprehension and deliberate precision, the way she seemed to be studying them even as they studied her. "How do you feel?" Dr. Strickland asked during the examination. "I feel well," Dinah replied. "Why do you ask? Do I appear unwell?" The question structure, its embedded assumption and counter-inquiry, came from a mind far beyond 20 months of age. "Do you remember me?" Dr. Pritchard asked. "I examined you several months ago." "I remember," Dinah said, and something in her tone suggested depths of memory and understanding that should have been impossible. "You were curious about me then. You are still curious, but also frightened. Why?" Before Dr. Pritchard could formulate a response, Dinah continued, "People are often frightened of things they do not understand. Are you frightened because you do not understand me, or because you are beginning to understand, and the understanding frightens you?" The three physicians stood silent, unnerved by the child's perceptiveness. Dr. Saunders cleared his throat. "You are very intelligent for your age." "Yes," Dinah agreed simply. "I am." There was no pride in the statement, no childish boasting, simply acknowledgement of fact. They completed their examination with growing unease. Every measurement, every assessment confirmed the same impossible reality: this child was developing at roughly twice the normal human rate, with no sign of the acceleration slowing. At her current trajectory, she would reach the physical development of a 6-year-old by her 3rd birthday, an 8-year-old by her 4th. But more disturbing than the physical acceleration was the cognitive development. Dinah's intelligence, her awareness, her capacity for abstract thought and complex reasoning all suggested a mind developing even faster than her body. What would such a mind be capable of as she matured? What would she become? After the examination, Dr. Strickland took Edmund Hartwell aside. "Mr. Hartwell, I must speak candidly. This child's development is beyond anything documented in medical literature. Her cognitive abilities are advancing at a rate that concerns me deeply. I would recommend what? Edmund interrupted. That I be concerned about an exceptionally intelligent slave child? Doctor, you perplex me. The child is healthy, growing well, and remarkably intelligent. These are assets, not problems. She will be extraordinarily valuable as she matures. Sir, I question whether you fully appreciate, I appreciate, Edmund said sharply, that I have a rare and valuable property. Whatever medical curiosity she represents, she is still my property, and her unusual qualities only increase her worth. I see no problem here, Doctor, only opportunity. The physicians left with their documentation and their unease, knowing they had no authority to intervene in what was legally a matter of property management. They submitted their third sealed report to the Charleston Medical Society, including for the first time explicit concerns about the implications of Dinah's accelerated cognitive development. We are observing a phenomenon without precedent, they wrote. A human mind developing at extraordinary speed within a body that ages at twice the normal rate. The child demonstrates reasoning abilities far beyond her chronological age, with awareness and comprehension that approaches adult levels. We cannot predict what such a being will be capable of as she continues to mature. We cannot even predict whether she will continue to follow human developmental patterns, or whether her growth will eventually stabilize. We are quite literally watching the emergence of something we do not understand and cannot control. The Charleston Medical Society's response was immediate and decisive. All documentation related to this case is to be sealed indefinitely. The implications of the observed phenomena are too extraordinary and potentially disturbing for public knowledge. The physicians involved are instructed to cease all examination and observation. No further reports will be accepted. This case is closed. The three doctors, frustrated but bound by professional duty, accepted the Society's directive. They had no choice. But they would not forget what they had witnessed, a child who should not exist, developing in ways that defied nature, growing stronger and more aware with each passing month. And in the sealed archives of the Charleston Medical Society, the documentation remained, measurements and dates that proved the impossible had happened, that a pregnancy had progressed from invisible to full term in less than a week, that a child was aging at twice the natural rate, that something profoundly wrong had taken root in the body of an enslaved woman and was growing toward an unknown and potentially terrifying maturity. Celia, the only person who truly understood what she had birthed, continued her daily existence in quiet desperation. She cared for Dinah because she had no choice. But those who watched her saw a mother who lived in constant fear of her own child. She never sang to Dinah, never played with her, never showed affection. She performed the minimum required tasks and nothing more, as if any additional engagement might invite catastrophe. Old Ruth, whose knowledge extended back decades and whose understanding went beyond what she could articulate, finally revealed to Samuel what she had been reluctant to speak aloud. "I seen something like this once before," she confessed in December 1848. "Long time ago, when I was young, maybe 12 or 13 years, down in the deep south on a sugar plantation. There was a woman, and she had a child that weren't right. Child that grew too fast, knew too much, could do things that scared everybody. Master of that plantation tried to sell the child away, but nobody would buy it once they met it. So the master tried to get rid of it another way." She paused, her face troubled. "The woman, the mother, she drowned herself and the child both in the river. Said it was the only way to stop what was coming. Said the child wasn't really her child, that something else was using her body to get born, and that it would bring death to everyone if it was allowed to live." "What you saying?" Samuel asked, though he already knew. "I'm saying Celia's child ain't the first one like this," Ruth replied. "And what happened last time this happened? It ended in death. That woman knew. She knew her child had to die, and that she had to die with it. Couldn't live with what she'd done, even if it was necessary. You think Celia gonna?" "I think Celia already dead inside," Ruth said quietly. "Just waiting for her body to catch up with her soul." The winter of 1848-49 settled over the Hartwell plantation, and with it came a sense of approaching catastrophe that even Edmund Hartwell, insulated by his privilege and willful ignorance, could not entirely ignore. The enslaved workers moved through their tasks with the grim efficiency of people awaiting disaster. Celia retreated further into herself, a shadow of a person going through the motions of existence. And Dinah continued to grow, physically, mentally, becoming something that nature had never intended to create. The end, when it came, would arrive on a cold February night, and would provide answers to some questions while raising others that would never be resolved. On the night of February 23, 1849, the enslaved quarters of the Hartwell plantation woke to screaming. Multiple witnesses reported that Celia's cabin was engulfed in flames, the fire spreading with unnatural speed despite the cold and damp conditions. By the time help arrived, the cabin had collapsed into burning rubble. William Fletcher, the overseer, organized a bucket brigade to prevent the fire from spreading to other structures. Once the flames were controlled, the grim task of searching the ruins began. They found 2 bodies in the remains, an adult and a child, both burned beyond individual recognition, but clearly identifiable by size and location. Dr. Saunders was summoned at dawn to examine the remains and provide an official medical opinion. His report, filed with local authorities and later sealed with his other documentation of the case, describes finding 2 sets of human remains consistent with an adult female and a child of approximately 2 to 3 years of age. Both bodies exhibited extreme thermal damage. However, certain findings suggest the fire may not have been accidental. The cabin's door, according to multiple witnesses, had been found barred from the inside, not secured with the simple latch that normally closed it, but blocked with furniture pushed against it, making escape impossible. Inside the ruins, Dr. Saunders found the remains of oil lamps that had been deliberately broken and distributed throughout the small space, suggesting the fire had been intentionally set with accelerants. Most disturbingly, Celia's body, identified by a metal bracelet that had survived the flames, was found in a position suggesting she had been lying down when the fire started, not attempting to escape. The child's body was found beside her, similarly positioned. Both appeared to have been dead or unconscious before the flames consumed them. The evidence suggests deliberate action, Dr. Saunders wrote carefully in his report. The mother appears to have barricaded the door, distributed accelerants, and initiated a fire that would ensure complete consumption of herself and her child. Whether the child was alive or dead when the fire started cannot be determined from the remains. However, the positioning suggests the child was not attempting escape, which is inconsistent with normal behavior. Confronted with the loss of valuable property, Edmund Hartwell demanded an investigation into whether any of the other enslaved workers had been complicit in the deaths. Fletcher conducted brutal interrogations, using the whip freely, but no evidence of conspiracy emerged. The enslaved community maintained they had been sleeping when the fire started and knew nothing beyond the screaming that woke them. Samuel's journal entry from February 24, 1849, tells a different story, one he could never have shared with white authorities. Ruth says Celia did what had to be done. Say she couldn't live knowing what her child was, couldn't stand watching it get stronger and smarter, knowing it would eventually bring death to all of us. Say Celia gave her own life and her child's life to save the rest of us. Ruth say Celia was brave, that it'd take a special kind of strength to do what she did. I don't know if that's true. I just know they both gone now, and the fear that been hanging over this place for 2 years finally lifted, like a dark cloud moved away and we can breathe again. Old Ruth, questioned by Fletcher about whether she had known Celia planned to set the fire, maintained her silence at first. When threatened with the whip, she finally spoke, carefully crafting her words to reveal nothing that could be proven while still conveying what she knew. Celia was troubled in her mind. Had been troubled since that child was born. Women who carry a burden like that, she don't think straight. She see things that ain't there. Fear things that can't be real. Maybe she got confused in the night, knocked over an oil lamp in her confusion. That what probably happened, just a confused woman and a terrible accident. Fletcher, satisfied with this explanation that matched the evidence while avoiding implications of deliberate action, recorded the incident as accidental death caused by mental instability and negligent handling of fire. Edmund Hartwell, having no legal recourse against a dead woman, accepted the verdict and moved on. He had lost property, yes, but not enough to justify dwelling on the matter. The 3 physicians, Saunders, Pritchard, and Strickland, learned of the deaths through newspaper reports. They met privately to discuss the case's conclusion, each man struggling with his own interpretation of what they had witnessed and documented over the preceding 2 years. "Perhaps it is for the best," Dr. Pritchard said quietly. "We were observing something that should not have been. Now it is ended." "Is it ended?" Dr. Strickland asked. "Or have we simply seen one instance of a phenomenon that may occur again? We documented an impossible pregnancy and an accelerated development that defied all natural law. If it happened once, can it happen again?" Dr. Saunders shook his head. "We will never know. Our documentation is sealed. Our observations dismissed as too extraordinary for credibility. The Charleston Medical Society has made clear they want this case forgotten, and perhaps they are right. Perhaps some knowledge is too dangerous to pursue." In March 1849, all 3 physicians began making plans to leave Charleston. Dr. Pritchard accepted a position at a Philadelphia hospital. Dr. Saunders moved to his family's property in Virginia, abandoning active practice. Dr. Strickland retired from medicine entirely, spending his final years managing investments and avoiding all discussion of his medical career. None of them ever spoke publicly about the case that had consumed them for 2 years, the mystery that had challenged everything they understood about human biology and development. The sealed reports remained in the Charleston Medical Society archives, gathering dust, their extraordinary claims never investigated or verified. The measurements and dates and impossible observations were preserved but hidden, known only to a few medical men who took the secret to their graves. Samuel continued keeping his journal until 1863, when he escaped during the chaos of the Civil War and made his way north. His writings, discovered decades later, provide the only account of the case from the perspective of those who lived closest to it, the enslaved people who witnessed the fear and the mystery and the tragedy that Edmund Hartwell never fully understood. The Hartwell plantation operated for another 15 years, until Edmund's death in 1864, just before Sherman's march brought destruction to much of the South. The property was eventually sold, subdivided, and developed. The site of Celia's cabin, the place where a mother killed herself and her child to prevent something she believed was evil, is now unmarked, forgotten, its exact location lost to time and urban development. But the documentation remains, sealed in archives, telling a story that medical science could not explain then, and has never satisfactorily explained since. A pregnancy that progressed from invisible to full-term in less than a week. A child who aged at twice the natural rate, with a mind that developed even faster than her body. A mother so terrified of what she had birthed that she chose death over allowing it to reach maturity. And 3 physicians who documented it all with scientific precision, then fled from their own discoveries, unable to reconcile what they had witnessed with what they believed possible. Was Celia's pregnancy the result of some unknown medical condition, some rare genetic anomaly that accelerated development in ways science has yet to document? Was her fear of Dinah the product of trauma and mental illness? Or did she perceive something real that others missed? Was Thomas Gaines's death truly natural, despite its suspicious timing and disturbing circumstances? Did Celia deliberately murder her child and herself? Or was the fire truly an accident, as the official record states? The answers died with Celia in that February fire. And perhaps that is as it should be. Some mysteries resist resolution, not because the truth is impossible to find, but because the truth would be impossible to accept. This case shows us how much we still do not understand about human biology, about the mysteries that can occur within a woman's body, about the limits of medical knowledge and the dangers of assuming we comprehend all that nature can produce. It reminds us that not everything can be explained, that some phenomena fall between the cracks of our understanding, neither clearly natural nor clearly impossible. What do you think of this story? Do you believe everything was revealed? Do you think Celia was right to do what she did, or was she destroying an innocent child out of irrational fear? Leave your comment below with your theories. If you enjoyed this tale and want more dark historical mysteries like this, subscribe now, hit the notification bell, and share this video with someone who loves stories that challenge everything we think we know about the past. I'll see you in the next video, where we'll explore another forgotten chapter of American history that was deliberately buried, and for good reason.